Today, I'm going to be sharing with you about my life and experiences guided and inspired and influenced by the thoughts, the words, and the teachings of Sri Aurobindo. I happen to be a teacher. I've been teaching first as a freelancer, theatre and education actor teacher. Then I was with the Delhi University in the Department of Journalism, and now I teach at Pondicherry University in the Department of Electronic Media and Mass Communication. The challenge for me always has been that how do I integrate the thoughts that have guided me personally in my life trajectory to bring those thoughts into the professional application so that what I have learned from Sri Aurobindo I can share with my students. How can we share the joy about integral yoga, integral education with the young generation who have probably never read Sri Aurobindo? How can we help them get in touch with their psychic being so that they know that the most important thing in life is within themselves? And it is from that core within them, the psychic being, that when it governs human existence, then life takes on a totally different quality of living and experience. Humanity today is facing a lot of crisis. Worldwide, there are conflicts happening, there is a lack of communication. I happen to be teaching media and communication, but I'm acutely aware of the lack of communication and the lack of presence between humans when they relate to each other and they communicate with each other. How do we resolve these conflicts? How do we overcome these differences? How do we achieve human unity and harmony and peace? How do we coexist together and support the flowering and the being of each psychic being? What I have learned in my journey of following Sri Aurobindo's teachings is that it has to be with egolessness. As we have read, the ego is the helper and the ego is the bar. Yes, so the ego is necessary to a certain extent, but beyond a point, we have to shed the ego. And how can we shed the ego if we are not open to the divine energy, to the divine Shakti, to the divine mother? It is with the help of the divine Shakti, the divine mother in her various forms, that we can overcome our lower nature, our lower prakriti, and be ready for a higher order of manifestation. In my sharing for an hour or so with you, which I'm very grateful to be able to do, and it is with deep gratitude that I share my ideas. I am no scholar or expert on Sri Aurobindo. I'm just a person like you, a very ordinary person, trying to live a life which is not that ordinary, trying to follow the teachings so that I can really try and apply the words of the Master. So it changes the quality of my life, the quality of my work, and hopefully I evolve a little bit more and I help my students around me and my community wherever I go to help them to evolve so that this human birth is not wasted. I seek your attention so that with me, let's go over some very important writings and words of Sri Aurobindo. I want to use this sharing like a meditation for all of us gathered here. Let's meditate and feel the power, the mantric power of his words, and how very clearly, very definitively, and very precisely he points out to what is it that we need to pay attention to. Now the question is, we have this great treasure house left to us, to humankind, by Sri Aurobindo. How much do we integrate these ideas and these words into our day-to-day living as parents, as teachers, as husbands and wives, as students, as administrators, as any person in any walk of life trying to do anything constructive, productive and meaningful on the time that we are here on this planet Earth. So I urge you and I invite you for the next 45 minutes or so to meditate on these words of Sri Aurobindo which I have selected. And I know that you cannot read them all, but they are easily available online in the collected works of Sri Aurobindo. And it is just to point your attention to something that he says, so I will go a little faster on the slides. You will not really get time to read them cover to cover, but the idea is to point in the direction that Sri Aurobindo is pointing us towards. I hope that I am a worthy instrument of the Master and that what I have to share you may find helpful in your own journey. So, as I just said, the presentation is based on Sri Aurobindo's words from the complete works of Sri Aurobindo. My first selection I have done is from the Yoga of Self-Perfection, and these are his words on the action of the Divine Shakti. And as we can see how beautifully he says, I will just pick a few words and phrases from here and there, but you can pay attention on the slide. I am not important. I am just an instrument, and I am the instrument through which these words will once again touch upon your ears and your heart and your presence, and let us all invoke what he has said and really pray deeply and earnestly that these words of Sri Aurobindo permeate into each and every cell and each and every part and plane of our being, so that we can be transformed and that we can be instruments of that transformation that is so crucial today for humankind. He says here, the universal power is apparent to us first on the lower levels of existence as a mental, vital and material cosmic energy, of which all our mental and vital and physical activities are the operations. And he says then, it is necessary for a sadhana that we should thoroughly realize this truth in order to escape from the pressure of the limiting ego view and universalize ourselves even on these lower levels where ordinarily the ego reigns in full force. To see that we are not the originators of action, but that it is rather this power that acts in ourselves and in all others, not I and others the doers, but the one Prakriti, which is the rule of the Karma Yoga, is also the right rule here. In these words, Sri Aurobindo brings our attention to the fact that I said was my learning journey in life, how to strive to be in that state of egolessness. How do we get out of this limited sense of the ego, which is to do with me, my, mine, or ours and theirs? How do we let go of separation and differentiation and truly move towards the goal of human unity? And then he says, but then we would rise above to a higher divine life. We must loosen the force of the ego and eventually get rid of it. Okay, and I move on to the next slide. If we can do this, then the separation of our mental, vital and physical consciousness from that of other beings thins and lessens. The limitations of his workings remain indeed, but they are broadened and taken up into a large sense and vision of the universal working. The specializing and individualizing differentiations of nature abide for their own proper purpose, but are no longer a prison. The individual feels his mind, life and physical existence to be one with that of others, admit all differences and one with the total power of the spirit and nature. In the second stage, the individual doer disappears, but there is not necessarily any quietistic passivity. There may be a full kinetic action, only all is done by the Shakti. Now, Sri Aurobindo is not asking us to become passive. He is not asking us to let go of the power of action, of thought, of assertive action. Instead, what he urges us is that we let go of that separate sense of self that makes us think that we are different from the others. He is helping us move to that understanding that we all are one. And it is in that oneness that we will find ourselves. And it is possible. Even the existence of Auroville, the formation of Auroville, was for that purpose, to realize human unity. Of course, there are differences. Of course, we will agree to disagree, and we may not agree with each other. However, once we know that we are instruments and each one is working with his or her psychic being, then we become more compassionate, we become more understanding. And having these goals of egolessness and merging with oneness, then everything else becomes secondary. And then we do not defend our personal point of view to the extent of saying that I am right and you are wrong. Everybody has a space in this universe, and everybody has an opportunity to blossom and grow in the divine light. He further talks about the Divine Shakti, and he says, it is her power of knowledge which takes shape as thought in the mind. The sadhaka has no sense of himself thinking, but of the Shakti thinking in him. The will and the feelings and the action are also in the same way nothing but a formation, operation, activity of the Shakti in her immediate presence and full possession of all the system. The sadhaka does not think, will, act, feel, but thought, will, feel, action happen in his system. Here he's pointing in the direction of surrender, of receptivity, of openness, that when we are open, it will descend. The right thought, the right word will come and be delivered through the instrument of this limited being, which is a part of the larger self. And then, as he says very beautifully here, the individual on the side of action has disappeared into oneness. So beautiful. Has disappeared into oneness with universal Prakriti, has become an individualized form and action of the Divine Shakti. He is still aware of his personal existence, but it is as the Purusha supporting and observing the whole action, conscious of it in his self-knowledge, and enabling by his participation the Divine Shakti to do in him the works and the will of the Ishvara. The master of the power is then sometimes hidden by the action of the power, sometimes appears governing it and compelling its workings. So we have agency. As human beings, we have agency, we have willpower, we have determination, we have choice, and we can choose to do something and not to do something. We can work with the premise of self-knowledge. That self is interested in expanding ourselves and moving into a larger area of oneness. That it is not to say that I, Radhika, what I say, listen to me, or I am right. I say Radhika, who has learned so much, and Radhika, who is sharing something that she has learned from so many people, is happy to share with you and would be happy if you can also connect with that teaching and learning, and you can also make it your own, and you can also benefit from it so that the quality of your life also becomes what is we aim for, the life divine or the divine life. So when we really care for each other, we connect to each other in that beautiful feeling of oneness when I am nothing, Radhika is nothing, Radhika is merely an instrument of her work, of the work of the Divine Shakti, who gives me the energy, the clarity, and gives me all that is necessary for me to function and for me to manifest that which is possible through me. Once I have that understanding, then I know that I am not separate and there is no other. We all are one. When we think like that, then it's possible for us to achieve the goal of human unity in spite of any differences that we may face on the mental, vital or physical planes. Now from the yoga of self-perfection, I draw your attention to a beautiful book which is my favorite. It's a book written by Sri Aurobindo and it's called The Mother. It's a small little book, and if you have not read it, I urge you to read it. It's easily accessible. There's also a recording on YouTube where the mother is reading the mother in her own voice, and it is so powerful. It is so energizing because I never met the mother. You see, I was born in 1968. The year Auroville was born is the year I was also born in this lifetime. And I have never met the mother. I have not seen her. But I feel that what she represented in her earthly existence and what Sri Aurobindo embodied in his earthly existence, I can understand what they tried to convey to all of us for our progress and for the progress of humankind, for the greater good. I can understand it through their words. Their words are my, what would I say, my doors and windows to enter into their presence, and which is why these words are important for me to share. So you directly read what the master had to say and not only a diluted interpretation of somebody, an ordinary person like me, has to say about them. So, like I said, I meditate on this book usually. My day starts with the mother. It is a 45 minutes recording in which mother reads out the mother, and the first 5 chapters I listen to them daily. And they remind me again and again and again that I must not forget. I must not forget in the mundane, humdrum, ordinary, daily, life that we have, where there's always stress, there's always deadlines, things to be done, goals to be achieved, a lot of stress that is coming to you from various sources. We have our own limitations of our own capacities and abilities. Sometimes people around us may not understand us. Sometimes we may feel very lonely. Sometimes we may feel that, I want to do all of this, but nobody understands me. Where do I go? Who do I ask for help? How do I actually manifest and realize all these beautiful words that Sri Aurobindo has given to us to help us go through this human journey with an aspiration to have a divine life? So for me, this book is very important, and it is helping me on a day-to-day basis to tackle any issue that comes up to me from morning when I wake up till night when I fall dead on my bed. And I have just selected a few words from here, and they're so important, they're so beautiful. Please meditate on them. I wish I could do it silently and you could just read them, but I will speak a few words. So in the first chapter, he talks about the importance of supreme grace. And the supreme grace acts only in the conditions of the light and the truth. He says it will not act in conditions laid upon it by the falsehood and the ignorance. I will take you to a few important sentences because we can't finish all of them in the time that we have. But if you've not read The Mother, you should be reading it. Just a second. I'm not being able to move the slide. I don't know what's happened. Okay, so let me try. Okay, so So he says that, these are the conditions of the light and the truth. And what does he say is the qualifying quality that we need to be open to the grace, to the divine grace. He says there must be a total and sincere surrender. There must be an exclusive self-opening to the divine power, and there must be a constant and integral choice of the truth that is descending, a constant and integral rejection of the falsehood of the mental, vital, physical powers and appearances that still rule the earth nature. Sri Aurobindo was aware that there are a lot of hostile forces and there are a lot of contradictory forces in play that will defeat the work of the divine. But we need to be in the aura of the divine grace, and we have to reject falsehood, and we have to be open, we have to be surrendered. To me, the quality of surrender is extremely important and something that I have cultivated over the years since I have been introduced to Sri Aurobindo's thoughts. The surrender must be total and seize all parts of the being, and there must be nothing in the being that makes a reserve. Anything that hides behind doubts, confusions, subterfuges, anything that revolts and refuses. You see, each one of us is human. We have different planes and parts of the being, and often within us there is going to be an inner churning and an inner kind of a opposition of forces where we want something, we want to go here, but we are moving in the opposite direction. We want to achieve human unity, but we are moving towards disharmony. We want to achieve the expression of the psychic being, but we are working or we are expressing from the mental or the vital being. When all the planes and parts of the being are not in harmony with each other within me as a manifestation of the divine, I cannot really make that possible in the external circumstances around me. It's not possible. As a teacher, I face a lot of challenges. I have students from all over the country coming to me from all diverse backgrounds, diverse languages, and who are joining a university education for various motivations, various purposes. How do I surrender to the work or the task that has given to me to be a teacher and to help to bring out the best in them and for them to be open to the grace which is around all of us and also to manifest their psychic being. All these chapters of the mother help me to do that. They help me to remember what kind of presence I need to cultivate in me first, because first and foremost I am a student. Unless I learn, I absorb and I assimilate all of these words, until I do that, I cannot express them with my students. This is from chapter 1. Then I have selected a few words from chapter 2. And in chapter 2, he says, in yoga, it is the divine who is the sadhaka and the sadhana. It is his Shakti with her light, power, knowledge, consciousness, ananda, acting upon the adhara, and when it is open to her, pouring into it, and these divine forces that makes the sadhana possible. But so long as the lower nature is active, the personal effort of the sadhaka remains necessary. The more I surrender, the more I am receptive, the more I understand that the divine Shakti, the divine mother is always there around me, guiding me. And I can pause, go within, sense the presence, rather than rush into action, rush into words. And then I will be shown the way that what is the right thing to be done in a particular situation. The personal effort required is a triple labor of aspiration, rejection, and surrender. These words are very important. Each one of us needs to understand these if we want to achieve anything worthwhile in our lives. An aspiration, vigilant, constant, unceasing. We are not passive, we are not in slumber, we are not sleeping, we are the hero warriors. The mind's will, the heart seeking, the ascent of the vital being, The will to open and make plastic the physical consciousness and nature. That's the aspiration. And what is the rejection? The rejection of the movements of the lower nature. Rejection of the mind's ideas, opinions, preferences, habits, constructions, so that the true knowledge may find free room in a silent mind. How many of us are comfortable with silence? Most people get very restless when they have to be silent. The first thing everybody does is pick up a mobile. Oh, what's happening? You know, update, WhatsApp, Insta, Facebook, a reel on Instagram maybe. I mean, everybody is so restless today, especially the young generation. They constantly want to engage with social media. You know, how many likes, how many subscriptions, I need to update this on Insta, I need to do this account. All the time we want some activity, we want to connect with people around, but are we really truly connecting? Are we giving ourselves the opportunity to go into that state of silence from which then we can have a deep and a meaningful connection with other souls and other psychic beings? Do we recognize that everybody whom we contact in our life is a psychic being? Do I recognize that each and every person that I face in my life is a psychic being manifested in a human form, and that I must reach out to her or his psychic being, and she or he must hopefully understand the expression of my psychic being? Do I live life from that quality of consciousness? Or am I just trying to fill my classroom with some information and content to make them a camera person, or to make them a content writer, or to make them a journalist or a filmmaker or a photographer or a photojournalist? Is that my limited aim, just to give them employment, or give them all that understanding with which they can do much more? So we need to let go and reject a lot of things in our lives if we want to be ready for the divine life, and the divine life as manifested in our own lives. And so he says here, when the grace and the protection of the Divine Mother are with you, what is there that can touch you, or whom need you fear? A little of it even will carry you through all difficulties, obstacles and dangers. Surrounded by its full presence, you can go securely on your way because it is hers. Careless of all menace, unaffected by any hostility, however powerful, whether from this world or from worlds invisible. Its touch can turn difficulties into opportunities, failure into success, and weakness into unfaltering strength. For the grace of the Divine Mother is the sanction of the Supreme, and now or tomorrow its effect is sure, a thing decreed, inevitable and irresistible. I would like to share with you that my human life is an example of the grace of the Divine Mother. It is not without the grace of the Divine Mother that I sit here today in a beautiful space housed in the Savitri Bhavan in Auroville, speaking to all of you. It is grace that has brought me here. And it is grace that will take me to my next destination. And when I know that I am in the grace of the Divine Mother, I really have nothing to fear, because I know that things are taken care of. But that does not take away from me the responsibility to do the right thing at the right moment. I cannot leave it to the Divine, that the Divine should do it for me. The Divine gives me all the support, but I must express what my psychic being tells me is the right thing to do. In the 4th chapter, he talks about money, and just a few words I shared here, because there's a lot of conflict around possession of money and wealth and resources in today's world. A lot of my students, when they work, they're constantly thinking, how much of a pay package will I get? Will I get 35,000 rupees a month when I leave Pondicherry University? Will I get 70,000 rupees a month? No, I don't want to work for 20,000 rupees. No, this is not good enough. I want more money. So the point is, today the whole world is driven by name, fame, wealth, money, position. That if what being offered to me is not good enough in terms of economic composition or doesn't give me a good name in society, I don't want it. So our relationship with resources, economic resources and money is something he's pointed our attention to, that all wealth belongs to the divine and those who hold it are trustees, not possessors. It is with them today, tomorrow it may be elsewhere. All depends on the way they discharge their trust while it is with them, in what spirit, with what consciousness, in the use of it to what purpose. Make no demand, but accept what you receive from her and use it for the purpose for which it is given to you. Here I bring you back to the beginning of my sharing on egolessness. When I am not operating from the limited self of this embodied human, apparition called Radhika, and when it's not this human apparition that is reaching out to you, but the psychic being of which is latent within this human form, it is reaching out to you, then I know that I am just a trustee. I have been given a laptop or a mobile, or I have been given a certain amount of money, or I have been given a vehicle, or I have been given a responsibility to head a department of electronic media and mass communication in Punjab University, but I have a tremendous responsibility because I am a trustee. Through me, I can do a lot of things if I optimally use the resources that have been given to me, because they don't belong to me. I have to let go of the ego. I have to be selfless, which he says further on. Be entirely selfless, entirely scrupulous, exact, careful in detail, a good trustee. Always consider that it is her possessions and not your own that you are handling. In the supramental creation, the money force has to be restored to the divine power and used for a true and beautiful and harmonious equipment. An ordering of a new divinized vital and physical existence in whatever way the Divine Mother herself decides in a creative vision. But first, it must be conquered back for her, and those will be strongest for the conquest who are in part of their nature strong and large and free from ego and surrendered without any claim or withholding or hesitation, pure and powerful channels for the supreme puissance. So we need to become aware of this tremendous privilege and a tremendous honor and a tremendous opportunity that Sri Aurobindo tells is available to all of us. That if we can understand all of these qualities, and if we let go of the ego and we surrender, then we can become strong, pure and powerful channels at any place in the world, doing any work, either just being a mother or a father or a husband or a wife, or having a professional profile of reaching out to many, many more people and touching many more lives through our works. Anything and everything is possible if we are worthy instruments of the divine. I take you now to 5th chapter, which is my favorite chapter from the mother. This is something I replay again and again. I listen to mother reading it out, and it's really kind of, I can feel her voice, her energy filling each and every part of my being and helping me understand that, do you want to be a true doer of the divine work? Radhika, are you ready? Do you want to just say Radhika says this, or do you want to say through Radhika a lot can be manifested of the eternal truth, goodness and beauty that has always existed, exists and will forever exist? Can I be a divine worker? Can I be a divine instrument? Can I be a child of the Divine Mother and let the Mother tell me what needs to be done and I should follow? So he says here, if you want to be a true doer of divine works, your first aim must be to be totally free from all desire and self-regarding ego. All your life must be an offering and sacrifice to the Supreme. Your only object and action shall be to serve, to receive, to fulfill, to become a manifesting instrument of the Divine Shakti in her works. You must grow in the divine consciousness till there is no difference between your will and hers, no motive except her impulsion in you, no action that is not her conscious action in you and through you. Please feel these words, and this short interaction is not going to be sufficient. If you're hearing these words first time in your life, you must at your own leisure, at your own pace, read and listen to these words so that they enter into your being, and if you're open and if you're surrendered, your life's going to change. And I will skip these slides, but he's repeating the same thing: all stress of egoistic choice, all hankering after personal profit, all stipulation of self regarding desire must be extirpated from the nature. What do I want? I have to let go of that. What is to be done? I have to focus on that. What is my obligatory duty? What has to be done for the divine through this instrument has to be my focus. A time will come when you will feel more and more that you are an instrument and not the worker. Okay? And it's beautiful about how the Divine Shakti then is activated in us and governs our life and our actions. And then he says there can be no more happy condition than this union and dependence. For this step carries you back beyond the borderline from the life of stress and suffering in the ignorance into the truth of your spiritual being, into its deep peace and its intense ananda. Like I just said in the beginning, I'm sure each one of us face a lot of adverse circumstances in our lives. We meet people who don't understand us. We have conditions which don't support our dreams, what we want to do. We have people who are challenging us. We have lack of resources which don't help us to express what we really dream of. In spite of all the difficulties and challenges that we face on this earthly existence, if we are living in the state of surrender, aspiration and rejection, and we are aligned to what the Divine Mother and the Divine Shakti has decided is the right thing for us, and we are connecting with the Divine Shakti from our psychic being and not from the mental, vital and physical planes and parts of a being, then believe me the human journey is absolutely delightful. It is blissful. Even the pain is a part of that eternal joy and ananda. And this, you can only experience it if your life is oriented in that direction. And it moves beyond the plane of the theoretical words into the real action. And again he says, the last stage of perfection will come when you are completely identified with the Divine Mother and feel yourself to be no longer another and separate being, instrument, servant or worker, but truly a child, an eternal portion of her consciousness and force. I mean, these words have really given me a lot of courage, a lot of assurance that when I feel I cannot achieve something with my limited instrument, and I get a little bit of panic or anxiety or worry that why things are not working out the way I want them to happen in spite of putting in my best efforts. And why is it that sometimes it seems that the universe is conspiring against you and things are not going your way? Stop. Be silent. Step back. Go within and try and connect with all these beautiful thoughts and understand that everything has a place, everything has there for a purpose. And once I go into that space of silence and I connect with the Divine Mother, the Divine Shakti, then I surrender. I said, Mother, it's your baby, it's your project, it's your idea. I want to do this, but I have limitations. I will put in my human effort, but I need help. And then I'll wait. And sometimes the answer does not come immediately. It comes after weeks or months or years. But as and when I feel I am connected and I'm ready, I then translate those ideas onto the plane of action, of the actual realization of these words. And from here, I go to integral education now, because I have only about, I think, 10 or 12 minutes left. And I think all of you know about integral education. But Sri Aurobindo has given 3 principles on integral education, as you can see on the slide here. And these are beacons of light for all of us who are in the field of education. If there's any teacher or administrator or parent, either at the school level or college or university, these are absolutely, again, amazing words which help you to reorient the way of Sri Aurobindo. He has raised questions which now in India the national education policy is addressing. It was formulated in 2020. It's the national education policy. It was revised after the national education policy in 1986. But what he wrote way back, more than a century ago, he had anticipated and he had projected and he had warned and he had informed all of us that what is the purpose of education, what is the aim of education, what is the aim of integral education. And these are his words, which you can, always pause the video and you can read them because they are there on your screen. From here, I go to the psychic being. I've already spoken about the psychic being, but for some of you, this must be or maybe a new concept of the ordinary consciousness. Is not at first developed, and even when developed, is not always or often in the front. It expresses itself so far as the imperfection of the instruments allows, by their means and under the limitations. I had foregrounded this in the beginning of my sharing with you, that letting go of the ego, striving for a state of egolessness, it's not easy, but it's possible. Aspiring to connect to everybody around us and realizing the goal of human unity and oneness, that's the second thing that I had foregrounded in the beginning. And who will do that? Who's going to do all this work on this human plane, in this human existence? It's the psychic being that's going to express and realize all these lofty ideas and goals of Sri Aurobindo. And he says the psychic part of us is something that comes direct from the divine, as in touch with the divine. If we feel and understand what these words imply, the whole quality of life is going to be so beautiful. It says here, it is always this psychic being that is the real, though often the secret cause of man's turning to the spiritual life and his greatest help in it. It is therefore that which we have to bring from behind to the front in the yoga. So we know the common and the popular adage, all life is yoga, and we all are aspiring to be yogis. And when we talk about being yogis, it's not about practicing the physical yoga or hatha yoga, but it's going to that understanding that yoga is the union with the divine. And if all life is yoga, and if we are yogis and we want to be yogis, then it is the psychic being within us that's going to do that turning for us and take us on that path. Just a second. I will just pause for a few seconds so the slide is there for you to read on later on. But I will not read from here because I have about 5 minutes left and I need to conclude. And the last slide, the psychic being may be described in Indian language as the Purusha in the heart or the Chaitya Purusha. But the inner or secret heart must be understood. And now, I quickly, when I wrap up, I contextualize what Sri Aurobindo said more than 100 years ago to now, right now, where India is and where India is transforming its fabric of education from the pre-primary Montessori level up to the higher education, everything is going through a churning. There's a big change that has come into education system. It has just started with the National Education Policy 2020. And the National Education Policy recognizes that the way we had of teaching and learning in our country was a leftover of the colonial, vestige of the British Empire in India. And we weren't really following the deep Indian thought and what was the purpose of Indian education or education at large. And I have taken a few references of other people who have written about integral education. Nelche D, who's from Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Kirit Joshi, who was actively involved with the Auroville community, and Partho, who was the principal of the Mirambika Free Progress School in New Delhi, and who has written this book, Integral Education. So I've taken culled a few words from here, from their commentary or writing on what is integral education. In integral education, as Partho writes here, this process is described further at the deeper plane of the human being as a threefold process: self-knowledge, awakening of the true center of one's being, psychic being, and an ongoing process of integration and harmony. The work of the individual is to analyze the psychological movements that occur inside oneself and to understand these with a sense of accuracy, to know which part of one's being they are coming from. Psychological tools such as self-observation, introspection, mindfulness, to gain self-awareness, self-understanding, and self-mastery are at the core of implementation of integral education. I conclude my sharing today with these words of Sri Aurobindo. He writes, he wrote, "The past is our foundation, the present our material, the future our aim and summit." So, as we move towards the future of humankind, and we carve the trajectory of what is it that we want to realize and manifest in the time that we are here on earth. We have a limited lifespan. It could be 50 years, 60 years, 70, 80, 90, if you're lucky, or we are healthy, maybe 100. But in the lifespan that I have in my lifetime, what is my aspiration? What is it that I really, really want to fulfill through this instrument? And I urge each one of you who are with me today that if you can go within yourself and get in touch with that little voice within yourself, which is your psychic being, and let that psychic being within you tell you what is good for you, or what is it that you can really do which can help uplift the quality of your life beyond living for money or living to pay your rent, or living to just go to work and come back from work, or raise your children, or teach your students so that they can give an exam, and they give an exam and they get a degree. Please do not underutilize the opportunity that you have to create a lot of wonder and a lot of magic when you're around in this earth as a human. Your students can experience what is the psychic being. Your students can lead their lives from their psychic being if you as a teacher and an educator can show them the way. I hope that all of us offer ourselves to Sri Aurobindo and become worthy of his grace. Thank you so much.
We end with a moment of silence.